Welcome to the Delivery Profits Across Borders. We're so grateful for all of you out there who tune into this podcast. Without you, we're just talking to each other in a recording studio. I'm Peter Backman, and I'm here with JJ. Together, we'll be taking apart restaurant delivery in countries around the world. So, JJ, that leaves things very open for us. Where do you want to start?
Hi, Peter. First of all, let me say hi to the audience and introduce myself. I'm JJ and I'm Gary. I'm the founder of Cosmo. Cosmo is a last mile delivery solution to manage on-demand and same-day delivery. We want to start talking about Asia. And the main reason is I spent 6 years from 2015 to 2021 based in the region. I had an apartment in Singapore, but I traveled all over the 12 countries that Foodpanda, which is the main food delivery player back then in Asia, was managing. We spent lots of time across Southeast Asia, but also going through Pakistan, Bangladesh, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, Japan. So we want to spend some time discussing mainly about Southeast Asia, but also about adjacent countries.
That's great. And then we can later on in other episodes, we can get into other countries as well around the world and see what lessons we can learn and how useful it can be for restaurant operators and anybody who's selling any products through delivery.
Yeah, me having been born and grown up in Europe, also worked in Europe, and then spending 6 years of my early professional life in Asia, I learned that every country is very different, specifically when you're talking about different continents with different economies, different cultures, religions, type of food. You realize that it's very interesting to learn what works, what doesn't work, and why something works in one place and not in another one. Also, as part of Foodpanda, which was a subsidiary from Delivery Hero, a global company, I spent lots of time also looking at MENA, LATAM. So the idea is that we can, over the course of this series, share with the listeners about all those countries.
Yes, and hopefully I can also bring in the United States, Europe, Africa. The world is what we want to make it in this series. And it's certainly true that restaurant delivery and delivery of groceries and flowers and so on is a truly global activity. And it's just grown up over the last, 10, 20 years globally. It's a huge phenomenon, I think.
We've seen it specifically in the last 10 years. We saw how it went from zero to where it is today. Not zero, because I think specifically in Asia in the year 2000s, there was a lot of delivery by phone. It was very, very much integrated into society. And that's why it's been one of the most successful markets for food delivery companies. But we can also discuss about where it's going in the next 10 years, seeing that growth has a bit plateaued in most regions. See what are the next ways.
Yeah, it's a challenge for everybody to work out what the next steps are. I think we've probably got some clues as to what we think they may well be, but we can get onto that as we develop talking about it. I'll throw it over to you. An open question. Which countries, which region do you want to investigate at this stage?
So I would like to start by sharing why Asia is cool and special, and it's by sharing some population numbers. So we're talking that, everyone knows Singapore, right? Very rich and developed economy. I mean, it's a bit of a miracle that, Lee Kuan Yew took over the country 50 years ago and made it one of the richest places in the world. But the surrounding countries, when you look at the population, is what makes it very interesting. So we're talking about Thailand with 70 million, Philippines 115 million, Malaysia bordering with Singapore 34 million. Then Indonesia 275 million, Vietnam 100 million, Taiwan a bit farther northeast 24 million, and then we can Bangladesh and Pakistan. So Bangladesh has 170 million people, and Pakistan 235 million people.
So I've been adding up those numbers while you're talking. It's well over 1 billion. It's huge.
Yes. I would like to also mention the players in the markets, right? So everyone might know Grab by now. Grab is what's called a super app, and I think that's why people look at Asia, because you have these super apps, right? So you have Grab that was born between Malaysia and Singapore, and then you have Gojek, which is a sort of competitor that started in Indonesia. We can also talk about how Indonesia and Southeast Asia are split. Normally, Indonesian companies stay in Indonesia because it's big enough market, and companies that start elsewhere, they expand across the region, but they don't really enter Indonesia many times. But Grab did it. Then we have Foodpanda. That's where I worked. That was the major food delivery platform that changed in the last 2 years. We can talk about that. Deliveroo was also present, mainly in Singapore and Hong Kong. Then in Thailand, we have a very powerful brand like Line Man. And then mainly Shopee Food successfully managed to get a spot in Vietnam as well, not so much in the other countries like Thailand or Malaysia, right?
For listeners, say from America or in Europe, you've hardly mentioned companies that they will be aware of. Delivery Hero, yes. Deliveroo, yes. But they've only got a small footprint in the area that we're talking about. You haven't talked about Just Eat. You haven't talked about Uber. You haven't talked about DoorDash. So we are actually talking about a whole different range of companies from what many people would consider to be typical restaurant delivery businesses.
And if we want to simplify how things started in Southeast Asia, I think it's important to mention three players, and that's Foodpanda, Grab, and Gojek. So Foodpanda started as part of Rocket Internet. Rocket Internet was this, let's say, startup launcher slash incubator that was starting startups all over the place. So Foodpanda started, and they just did food, always food delivery. They just focused on food delivery. Grab and Gojek instead they started as ride hailing. So you could see them as Uber. Yeah, they started as Uber in Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. So then as they evolved, those two companies, then naturally, same as Uber launched Uber Eats, they launched their food delivery platform, right? Grab Food. And I think they also call it Go Food, right? But the interesting thing about those two players is that they didn't stop there, as Uber did. They started to do so many adjacent businesses. So in Grab, you can book a hotel. Grab has Grab Pay, so you can pay with the Grab app in any restaurant or retailer. Gojek has Go Massage. They have Grab Express, which is a parcel delivery application. During that time, Foodpanda kept focusing on food. And I think until 2021 that served well. Foodpanda was the leading player in food, mainly because they were very good in food, right? But Grab and Gojek, they decided to go deep into food. They struggled at the beginning, but then they found that being the super app that everyone used for getting a taxi, paying at the restaurant, ordering groceries, it gave them a very big advantage. They had the users already, so they just had to convince them they could order food there, and over time improve the experience. So fast forward today, we're in a place that Grab dominates most of the markets. Gojek is neck to neck with Grab in Indonesia, and Foodpanda, unfortunately, in the last 2 years they lost a bit of a path, and now they are normally second player in each market, right? Foodpanda, of course, also expanded into grocery, which is very, very close adjacent to food. But yeah, just to summarize this first part of the chat, it's been interesting, specifically to see those players like Grab and Gojek, how they struggle to get leadership in food, but by getting access to all those users and engaging them through the other applications, you could say they kind of sort of won the market, and they are leaders now, right? They convince those users to stay in the app because you can do everything in that app, right?
That's quite a different model to the model that, say, DoorDash have, which is we do delivery and we focus on that. Sure, Uber, as you've said, do delivery and they have ride hailing, so there's a crossover and there are benefits. Do you think that one of the benefits of a super app is that the focus on profitability is less because of this interaction and the ability to move customers from one part of the super app to the other? And therefore, an argument is, well, it might not be as profitable as it should be, but at least we've got the customer who's spending money in more profitable areas on the app. Is that an argument that works?
Yeah, that's something we discussed back in the days when I was at Foodpanda. At Foodpanda, you pay for a user, right, but with an ad or whatever, and then you need this user. This user will spend with you to get food. In the other, if you're a Grab and you have a super app and you have like 10 applications, you pay for a user, and that user can spend money in 10 applications. It's not so straightforward. I think I don't think it's so easy to build such a super app, and that might be the reason why it doesn't work in other cultures. I think in Asia specifically work. You can also see it happening in China. So I wonder if there's some influence there by being geographically close to China. But now you can also see Elon Musk talking about this super app, right? He wants to start from the fintech side of things and then going into other areas. I think in Asia, the combination of fintech with e-commerce or food works very close because food is very high frequency usage. Payment companies make money with high frequency, right? That's why the super apps went into that area in Asia.
Right. So it's partly a question of maximizing the revenue per customer rather than maximizing the revenue per order, which I think is one way of characterizing what happens in Europe and the United States, for example. What you're saying in the countries that we're looking at today, it's a question of saying we've got the customer and we want the customer to spend as much money with us as we can. We don't mind where, we just want them to spend as much money as they can. Whereas the European and US model is we grabbed a customer for an order, so let's maximize the take on the order.
I think the interesting thing here also, and the main differences between those two regions, is that the order frequency, the number of times a customer orders, if we focus on food, in Asia is way higher than here. It's way more common to get delivery. And that's not because of the food delivery platforms. That was before. I think not talking so much about the US, but in Europe, we have a way bigger culture of eating at home. And that when we go for a restaurant, we go for the experience, right? But just to give you an example, the houses or the apartments in most of the Asian countries, they have very, very small kitchens because traditionally people ate already outside. They were very used to pick up something on the way home, right? And then they just ate at home. So that also made it that food delivery grew so much. It's so big, people order so much, the frequency is super high, right? Just to give you an idea. Taiwan, I think it's one of the countries in Asia, in the world with the highest, what you could say, user penetration. So there's more orders per month than inhabitants. So there is 20, if I'm not wrong, 24 million people in Taiwan. As of today, there might be 40 to 50 million food delivery orders every month, as people eat a lot through food delivery. So that makes that the way to make money as a business is completely different in that case.
Another characteristic, and I may be moving the conversation on a bit, I don't know, but another characteristic of these markets that you've been talking about, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, is that they've got a ratio of people with a lot of money and people without a lot of money. They've got the correct ratio. And by that, I think I mean people with a lot of money are going to be placing the orders for the delivery. And the other side of the equation is getting the order delivered to them. And there are enough people who are, quote, hungry, unquote, enough to do the delivery. And they've got the right balance in those countries.
The economics are very important here. So for you to eat a lot outside, there needs to be the price of the food itself. And I'm not talking about delivery here. The price of the food needs to be good enough so I can eat multiple times a week outside or daily even. So the average restaurant ticket needs to be low enough compared to the acquisition power, disposable income of the citizens, so they can do it daily or multiple times a week. That's just to eat restaurant, which I think in that case in Asia, you can eat at a very good price outside daily or multiple times a week. In Europe, that's not the case. In the US, similar, right? I cannot go to a restaurant as many times as I would want because it costs quite some money, right? Compared to what it would cost me to eat outside at home. Then there needs to be also enough people that are willing to pay for a delivery fee that is cheap enough for the disposable income, but that gives enough money to the driver. And that's also the interesting thing. I think Asia has a lot of uneducated people that they are willing to do a job for a price low enough that makes it good enough for a customer to order online, right? And in especially if you think of Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, you have hundreds of thousands of drivers that are willing to do that. And the interesting thing is that they can make more money doing that than working in a supermarket or as a waiter. So in Asia, you have this combination of people that have enough money to buy online and pay the fee, and a lot of people that are willing to deliver for low prices to incentivize those guys to order.
So here's a challenge for you then. Is there a number, is there a ratio that says if a country meets that ratio, it's a great place for delivery? Is there such a thing?
I think we should come up with that ratio. I've always I always talk about this relationship. I don't know what's that ratio, but we could calculate. I have some numbers. We could create that ratio, and I think that can be very interesting. But just to comment on that, if you think about Europe, I'm thinking about Spain now, since I'm based in Spain, or Germany, where I work, we have very high employment costs, right? So if the driver takes 10 euros home, the cost to the employer is maybe 16, right? Which means that the customer needs to cover those 16, right? In Asia, the driver takes 10, the customer pays 10 because they're freelancers, right? And that's not fiscal or tax valid truth, but in many cases, they don't even need to report it because it's below certain threshold. So they take 100% of that, right? In Europe, it's artificially expensive because of labor laws. So, but yeah, let's come up with that ratio. I think that can be interesting. But Europe specifically is very bad for delivery because the drivers are very expensive. Huge percentage of the population is educated, so there's not enough drivers to also lower the price. So it makes it less nice for customers to order often. So then the volume or the penetration is way lower than in Asia.
Okay, so let's just stop for a second there, and maybe we'll just carry on talking about the riders for a little bit in the countries that we're particularly looking at. But I just want to say that if you're enjoying the show, please consider supporting us by leaving a 5-star rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Your ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help more people discover our content. And it's the best way to show your appreciation for the hard work that the team at the Delivery World are doing, the team at Cosmo, and the Avico team are doing. So go ahead and hit that 5-star button. Let's return then to the riders because they're the unsung part of the delivery space. People involved in it know that they're involved, but people who aren't involved in delivery don't really appreciate how significant the rider is. Without the rider, there is nothing. The rider has to do things at low cost compared with the cost of the food itself. And it's not always very easy being a rider or a driver or however it gets delivered because conditions may not be brilliant, rainy or roads that are blocked. All of those things cause huge problems for the rider. Do you think there are particular characteristics in the countries that you're looking at to do with riders, or are they the same sort of people that you would come across wherever you look at it, at the delivery business?
Well, so you see that in Asia, the average driver is not 20 years old like it's in Europe. You can see family fathers. I'm not saying it's the most common driver, but it could be within the average. Yeah, you have many people that they just do this as a job. It's their profession to be a driver, and they do it for a reason.
You said it's a profession. Do you actually mean that? It's a job. It's how they describe themselves. Is that what you're getting at?
It changed in the last years as it became very big and you needed to expand the number of drivers. But for example, when I started there in 2015 in Malaysia, the average driver was 37. Of course, that went down because you needed to attract more drivers, and the younger generation are the people who make less money, so they can be more attractive to it. But the driver job is very interesting, and specifically if you allow them to make more money than in comparable jobs or the alternative, which was to be a waiter or to be in operator in a factory, which are also not very safe or whatever adjective you want to call jobs. I think the key there is those people, they call it a job. It was a profession for them. Now it changed a bit. And you can also see that the average hours that the driver worked back then was more like 30 to 35. Now might be 20 to 25. So you have way more part-time drivers that they have other jobs, right? So it's less of a profession. I think it's interesting to mention a case here also, which is what makes food delivery grow. If you order delivery and you get the food in 35 minutes, you might think that's fine. You're okay. You're not extremely happy, but you're not sad. But if you start to get it in 20 minutes, you're gonna think that's magic, right? The experience is 5x better. If you can order it at very low delivery fees, then you're gonna start to do it more and more. And that's something that happened in Asia. The average delivery times there are 23 minutes. 23 minutes, 20 to 25, depends on the country, the city. But you can say that in Taipei, it was even less than 20 minutes. You got, on average, you got the food in 18 minutes. That also is special about Asia. Why is that special? Of cities that are very dense. There's so many restaurants. You get restaurants very close by. Since you can pay drivers less, you have lots of drivers in the street. Since you have lots of drivers in the street, they can pick up and deliver faster. In Europe, since there's not enough drivers, then when you order, the driver needs to finish another order first. That's why it takes 35 minutes and not 20. Because if you think about it, the restaurant needs 10 minutes to cook and the driver needs 10 minutes to come home, right? But since the driver is busy doing something else, and because there's not enough drivers, then the experience is worse. Since the experience is worse, there's less orders. And so that's something very special about Asia, that is the outcome of high density and lots of people that can do the job. Basically, I think that makes it very, very special also.
Right. So we've talked about the delivery companies and how they're structured, and we talked a bit about riders. I think there's lots and lots we can talk about in that area. We haven't really talked about the operators, the restaurants, and so on. And I just wonder whether I can ask a naive question about the food, because in Western countries, we have a view about what Far Eastern food actually is, because we've got lots of restaurants that are supposedly serving that type of food. But if you go into the countries that you're talking about, is the food what we would expect from a Western perspective, or are there different characteristics, and how does that play out in the delivery space?
So there's a very high share of the typical guys, McDonald's, Burger King, Five Guys, well, you name them. There's a very high share of that. So in that sense, the world is becoming more Americanized in that sense. And then you have the long tail, and the long tail is things that you cannot find here, which is local food from each specific country. That can be Chinese, that can be more Indian, that can be Malay, that can be Filipino, right? Or Thai, of course. And those are very cheap dishes. And that's what the average person orders. And if they don't order, they'll just go pick up, right? I'm not a very big Asian food lover. I always ate European food when I was there. But I think what makes it also a bit unique is that you have the local food in each of the countries is always very cheap. Just to give you some numbers, I think Singapore is on average, the per capita income is higher than London, just in case the people don't know, right? If you want to go eat a pizza, it's going to cost you the same as in London. If you want to eat a steak, it's going to cost you the same as in London. But if you want to get some local food, it's going to cost you, you can eat for €4. A decent meal, a decent meal. You cannot do that in London.
So that's $4, £4.
Yeah, 4 to 5. Yeah, you can even do it for less. So that's Singapore. If you go to Malaysia per capita income might be Malaysia might be around 20. Yeah, look, need to double check, but might be around $20,000. You can eat for €1 to €2. So Thailand similar, right? So Philippines similar. I think that hasn't happened in European countries. Spain has, I think, around $30,000 average per capita income. You cannot eat for less than €10, right? So there's significant difference in that sense.
So the food can be much cheaper as a percentage of disposable income.
Way cheaper. And you see it the most in a place like Singapore, which is very rich, but you still maintain those very low prices for local food. That's related to the fact that people need to do that every day, right? They don't see it as a luxury. It's their day-to-day is eating that food.
Right. It's a necessity. But what did they do 30 years ago then, when the delivery companies weren't around?
They called. I think so. Those countries had an existing delivery industry since the early 2000s and potentially earlier. People were used to call, and as of nowadays, they say that 50% of the delivery volume in Asia is still happening by phone. Many restaurants had their own 2 to 3 to 5 to maybe more delivery drivers that delivered, right? As food delivery started and grew in the last 10 years, many restaurants stopped having their own fleet and they started to rely on the food delivery companies. But back in the days, they had a phone and they just delivered with their own drivers.
So the actual volume of delivered food in the countries that we're talking about may not have changed very much over the last 20 years.
Well, no, I'm sure it did, because I think the applications brought in maybe the younger generation, and the frequency for sure has increased because there's less friction.
And because of COVID, presumably that drove the market in every country.
COVID's impact was crazy because there were lockdowns, and you have a population that is used to eat every day outside that never cooks in their daily life. So they were ordering every day.
Yes. So, right at the beginning of this podcast, you said that the market in the 6 countries is plateauing. I guess there is a whole bunch of questions around that, and we've only got a limited time to talk about it. But what is happening and what is likely to happen, in your view, about the size of the market? I don't know, over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
I think it's very tricky and I don't have certainties. What's clear is that it's sort of plateauing. And I think we, in those countries, we reached a stage after the huge COVID growth that it was very hard to keep growing. And then, in terms of, if you look at the global economy, the central banks increased interest rates, so financing became more expensive. So those companies had to become profitable. When they had to become profitable, they raised delivery fees, and they raised delivery fees to a point that they reduced demand, right? So that happened. The question is here: is financing going to be cheaper again in the next 30 years? Don't know, right? If that doesn't happen, these companies will not grow, because to grow they need money to invest in vouchers, lower delivery fees, and so on. I anyways think that the restaurant delivery game is going to keep growing, but a single digits and way lower rates. What I think is going to happen in the next, don't know if 3, but maybe 5 to 10 years, is that the use case of food delivery is going to expand to other industries: flour, pharma, groceries, which is already growing, right? And other similar use cases. And I think the next wave of growth would rather come from that, rather than the restaurant delivery industry doubling again.
Yes, I think that's a common picture wherever you look now. In other words, the market, notwithstanding what you said about a pre-existing market in Southeast Asia, the market grew rapidly before COVID. It then accelerated during COVID, and it's now got to a level where finding growth is much more challenging within the restaurant delivery business. But there are other opportunities that you can make use of, either if you've got a super app or if you've got an existing delivery capability. And you've mentioned pharma and flowers, and in certain countries there's DIY and so on, all sorts of different opportunities. That's going to give growth as well. But I guess there's a limit to how long that can last as well. But there is still a future.
Yeah, I think it's very worth mentioning that, because we didn't talk about that food delivery grew a lot in Asia at negative economics, right? So there was a lot of money that went into financing that. Well, the same for Uber, right? That I think the other day I heard that they spent $50 billion over the last 10 years, and they didn't make a single dollar yet, right? After after 12 years, right? So specifically in Asia, there was a lot of money burned to grow that, right? There was free deliveries, there were discounts, and those kind of things. In the moment that you had to stop giving those, you stop growing. And there is a behavioral reason there. If you are used to paying $10 for your pizza, you don't want to pay 10 plus 3 now, right? So there's, even though it's worth it because you save time, people don't like to pay $3 or $5 or whatever for the pizza because they're used to pay $10, right? So if there's no more ways to lower those prices or to give discounts, it will be very hard for it to grow. It will rather be about how to expand those use cases, like groceries, where you can have very big baskets, can be profitable. Flowers, also big baskets, high margins. Pharma, where people, they need to pay for urgency because they need the medicines now. So I'm rather favorable and betting on those industries growing more than restaurant delivery in the next 10 years.
I have to say, I think you're right. And that may require a different mindset from the consumer as much as from the delivery companies. And it may well be finding new products to deliver that people hadn't really thought about before. I wonder whether, is there anything else that you feel we really ought to be covering in this initial view about markets across borders? Or have we covered the key issues?
I think we can leave it here. I think we also, on this last topic, we might expect some consolidation in the next years. We saw that now Foodpanda sold their Taiwan business for 1 billion to Uber Eats. We might see something similar in other countries. It's a market where you can only make money if you're the leader. If you're the second in the market, it's very hard because you don't have the power to raise commissions or delivery fees or pay less to the drivers. So I think for sure we're going to see some consolidation. We can talk about this later, but that can be also exciting.
Yes, I agree with you about consolidation. It's something that I've been writing about quite a lot. And when you look at the 6 countries that you've been talking about, the fact that Grab now have about 50% of all of the markets, whereas a few years ago their share was much smaller, is an argument in favor of this growing consolidation. And the smaller businesses either exit the market or get acquired. I think that's the process that we're going to be seeing not only in Southeast Asia, but around the world.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I found this conversation really interesting. One important issue is the culture in the countries you've been talking about, the use of kitchens at home being quite small and therefore having to get food from outside is an important driver. The use of super apps, the growth of super apps in Southeast Asia, which we don't necessarily see in other countries. Delivery is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And also another point that you made, which struck me as being very correct, if you like, is that density drives down delivery costs. You've got to have the right level of density. Too dense means that just getting the product delivered becomes an issue, but sufficiently dense means that you can drive down your costs to the maximum. So looking at the ratio that we talked about before, this is another ratio. What is the ideal density? But we don't need to answer that question now. So all of that says to me that there's an awful lot to talk about in any country that you want to look at. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity of talking about other countries with you in future episodes.
Yes, just to finish, I think I like always to say the density is the most important thing in delivery. Of course, you need a good team and technology and so on, but there's nothing more important than density. You can have the smartest guys in the world, the best technology in the world. If there's no density, you cannot do much, right? So that's why there's out there some old school logistics companies, like I'm not going to mention, that they don't have good technology and good stuff, but they have lots of density and they do things manual, but they still make it work because density is the king in delivery. So yeah, happy to finish this conversation with this intro.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought to end with. So thank you very much. And here's a reminder that whether you're a restaurant owner, a delivery company, a marketplace app, a technology company, an investor, or simply someone who loves to order takeout, the delivery profits across borders is the perfect way to stay informed and ahead of the curve in the world of food delivery. You'll find Across Borders and the other podcasts from the Delivery Profits on Spotify, Apple, or on the other places where you normally get your podcasts. And there's more at www.thedelivery.world/The Delivery Profits. Please support the show by leaving your 5-star rating and tune in to the next edition of the Delivery Profits Across Borders for the insight and analysis that will keep you ahead of the game wherever you are in the world. And with that, it's goodbye from today's Delivery Profits. That's JJ and me. Goodbye.
Goodbye.